This film is about a psychological condition that can affect people who have had lots of traumatic experiences. It is called complex post-traumatic stress disorder. We call it complex PTSD. We'll explain what PTSD is and go on to explain how complex PTSD differs from this. Later, we'll share the feelings and experiences of survivors of complex PTSD who have volunteered to contribute to this film. There are broadly two types of trauma. Some traumas happen out of the blue, for example, a car crash, a mugging, a natural disaster, or the sudden death of a loved one. These traumas are called type 1, or simple trauma. They can be very scary, and some people develop a range of difficulties afterwards, called post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Everyone is different, everyone is unique, and everyone responds in different ways to their experiences. Even people who have experienced the same trauma may react differently afterwards. The thing about simple trauma is that it has a beginning and an end, and once a traumatic event is over, there is no further threat. Before looking at complex PTSD, let us think more about simple PTSD. That is the psychological reaction that can follow simple trauma, such as a terrible accident. PTSD is made up of different types of reactions. Re-experiencing. This can be in nightmares. That is bad dreams about the past or feeling threatened in our dreams. Or flashbacks. Feeling as though you're back in time and the trauma is happening again and again. Intrusive thoughts. The memory suddenly pops into your head even though you might not want it to. Someone might say, "I can't stop thinking about the accident, no matter how hard I try." Another symptom of PTSD is hyperarousal. This means feeling jumpy, as though you're on edge all the time, and that you're looking over your shoulder as if you're expecting something bad to happen. Being on high alert a lot of the time can result in difficulties with memory, sleep, concentration, and anger. A further symptom of post-traumatic stress disorder can be avoidance. With this, you feel as though you might want to avoid anything that reminds you of the trauma. You might also feel numb or disconnected. Our brains are fantastic, the most complicated computer known to man, which has helped us to thrive and survive over time. Our brains have developed over millions of years to work in a way that allows us to cope with the threats of everyday life. Like many animals, humans have basic desires, feelings and needs which have ensured the survival of our species, and they happen in a part of what is referred to as the old or primitive brain, something we have in common with other animals. Like many other animals, the old brain allows us to hunt for food, find shelter, mate and fight with others. Human brains have evolved even more over about 2 million years. During this process, the new brain has developed to work alongside the old brain and has given us our sense of self, our identity, our planning and problem solving, and our capacity to think about and imagine past and future events. These new brain skills enable us to become aware of a world that is rich in possibilities and opportunities. The new brain is extremely sophisticated, which has allowed us to develop in science, culture and art. However, this has also made us able to think about threats in the world in many different ways. Although it is a good thing that we are able to think about and learn more about our experiences, the existence of the new brain also allows us to torment ourselves with our thoughts, feelings and memories. How does our brain respond to threat? There are 4 main areas of the brain involved in responding to trauma. The thalamus, also known as the gatekeeper, takes in information all the time for all 5 senses: sight, sound, touch, smell and taste, to help detect what is going on. It then works very hard to make sure the information is correctly sent to the right part of the brain to be dealt with. The thalamus sends this information to the amygdala. This area is like a customs officer that checks information for potential threats and notifies us by setting off an alarm. This alarm releases stress hormones so we can fight, flight, or freeze. These are automatic responses trying to protect us. Next is the hippocampus, or the filing clerk for the brain. This area helps to process information by storing it in the proper place in our life's timeline, by giving it a beginning, middle, and end. Once stored, this information is remembered in a clear way that makes sense to us, and remembering it feels within our control. Finally, the frontal cortex is like the chief executive of a company. It limits and selects information and is in charge of attention, concentration, planning, motivation, and decision-making. It can choose between good and bad actions and controls our responses to ensure that our behaviour is socially acceptable. The frontal cortex also has the important role of helping us to retain longer-term memories that are associated with emotions. Unfortunately, the thalamus isn't very good at telling the difference between real threat and memories of trauma. Therefore, the amygdala can be triggered by the thalamus when we are just remembering a traumatic event, releasing stress hormones and getting the body ready to respond to threat. When the customs officer is activated this way, it knocks out the normal functioning of the filing clerk and chief executive. The traumatic event is not processed properly, preventing the memory from being stored in the correct place, and instead allowing it to invade the present in the form of flashbacks, nightmares, and intrusive thoughts. It also means that we feel confused and struggle to think clearly, logically, or rationally, and all attention is focused on feeling threatened. With post-traumatic stress disorder, the brain is acting as if the threat is alive and current and is trying to keep the body safe. Some people get better naturally in time, but others may need help from mental health professionals. Remember, everyone is different, everyone is unique, and everyone responds in different ways to their experiences. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder is different. This occurs when trauma is anticipated, interpersonal, and repeated. This is called complex trauma. Examples of this type of trauma include abusive childhood experiences, neglect in childhood, domestic abuse, violence, torture, as well as seeing or fearing that these things are happening to others. These may be experienced or witnessed. In addition to the PTSD symptoms of nightmares, flashbacks, intrusive thoughts, hyperarousal, and avoidance, complex PTSD includes difficulties with emotions, relationships, and how someone feels about themselves. It is important to know that the way someone's brain and body reacts to complex trauma is a normal response to abnormal events. It is not a sign that you are going crazy. You are not going mad. Your brain is doing what it is meant to. It is trying to protect you. Complex PTSD affects someone's feelings and how they manage them. Complex trauma can generate emotions that feel scary, dangerous, and overwhelming. Trauma can also make it seem unsafe for people to show their feelings to others. It therefore makes sense that people can develop difficulties with how to manage following trauma. Sometimes people find alternative ways of dealing with their feelings, or find ways to shut them down. Complex PTSD can also be linked with a sense of shame and a person feeling bad about themselves. Sometimes trauma has given people messages about themselves, like being worthless or that they were to blame. This can come directly from what people have said or how someone has made sense of things that have happened to them. Trauma sometimes causes people to act or behave in ways that people don't like about themselves, adding to feelings of shame and worthlessness. Complex PTSD impacts on people's relationships and the world around them. It also involves experiencing or witnessing harm caused by someone else. It is therefore understandable that this can lead to difficulties with trust and feeling safe with others. People might find it difficult to assert themselves. Taking control or keeping a distance in relationships can be a way of trying to avoid being hurt again. In addition, people can experience physical effects. This can be very scary. And yet it can be understood that your body, as well as your mind, remembers trauma. In other words, people can feel trauma in their body in a physical way. With some people, this can show itself as health problems like stomach problems, gynecological problems, headaches, panic attacks, and even asthma. Sometimes, people can also describe losing awareness of their surroundings for periods of time, like zoning out, or their mind taking them somewhere else. Zoning out can be a way of coping and surviving the trauma. Traumatic experiences and symptoms may also result in feelings of hopelessness. Sometimes people say that they feel they have lost connection with themselves, others, and the world as a whole. All of these difficulties can be helped. Our brains are plastic. That means able to change and adapt regardless of our age or experiences. We can learn how to manage symptoms more effectively and teach our brain to manage threats and fears in a way that does not cause more problems. Your brain is working very hard to protect you from what it thinks are threats, but are actually memories. The aim of psychological therapy is to help you develop better ways of coping to reduce the impact of trauma. Greater Glasgow and Clyde NHS Psychological Trauma Service can offer help to people presenting with complex PTSD through assessment and individual and/or group treatment. We also offer training, consultation and advice to other health, social work and third sector agencies. We'd like to finish by saying thank you for watching our film about complex PTSD. If you can relate to any of the difficulties described in this film, we would like you to remember that you don't have to be alone with these difficulties. Help is available if and when you feel that the time is right for you.